My name is Helena, and we're back to continue our conversation with Dr. Moondust, biochemist and cancer biologist. And we're talking about a chapter she has contributed to a recently published book entitled Some RNA Viruses. We have a link to that book and the publisher below. So Dr. Moondust, thank you for following on what we have shared about how the virus works in the body. What can you tell us about the top risks for COVID-19?
Well, Helena, they can be divided into internal and external risk factors that increase your chances of contracting the virus. And the top internal risk factors appear to be age, although that demographic seems to be shifting somewhat with the new variants to younger populations.
Yes.
Obesity, high blood pressure, diabetes, smoking, your gender if you're male, cancer patients have a higher risk, and then there's certain Neanderthal genes that make you more susceptible. And this is really quite interesting. If you don't mind, I'll give you a little refresher in paleoanthropology.
Oh, on the Neanderthal, absolutely. I didn't want to seem ignorant, but I'd love to know.
So the vast majority of people in Africa are pure Homo sapiens, and that's what we always thought we were, right? But actually then, as humans started to migrate out of Africa to Europe and Asia and other destinations, they started mingling with other hominid species. So you have mixtures with, we started mixing with Neanderthals, and mainly Asians also mixed with another hominid species called Denisovans. So in this case, there's some Europeans and certain South Asians, particularly people from Bangladesh, who have certain genes from a common Neanderthal ancestor from Vindija, Croatia. And they inherit a group of genes that make them a high risk factor for the respiratory failure that is caused by COVID-19. So it's really interesting.
Wow, you don't commonly hear about that when you talk about risk factors. When you hear about it on the news, there's all of these very interesting ethno-cultural paleo undertones. Thanks for explaining that. Now,
yeah, it's very new research.
Yeah, wonderful. What about the external risk factors?
Okay, well, there's urban air pollution, which we've talked about before. Crowded living conditions in slums, for example, in cities like Rio and Mumbai, that's been a factor. And then degree or frequency of exposure. And that's why you have younger doctors and nurses getting this, at least the original version.
Right, the intensity, so they get a heavier burden or load, maybe you might say. So what are we looking at in terms of symptoms? There's symptoms and complications that we're hearing about.
Okay, so this is the puzzling thing about the new coronavirus. There seem to be so many different symptoms. First, we heard it was pneumonia-like, then it could include gastrointestinal symptoms, and finally that it could cause respiratory failure, septic shock, and multi-organ failure even.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like diagnosis for doom. And now we're here. Yes, sorry, go ahead, doctor.
Then we learned there could be thrombotic complications like blood clots that could lead to strokes, neurological symptoms like loss of smell, and it could possibly even trigger diabetes in some patients. And then on top of that, there are the long haulers and long-term symptoms like anxiety, depression, fatigue, even damage to the lungs.
Mm-hmm. And really, who would have thought when we're tuning into the 6 o'clock news that thrombotic complications would suddenly become part of our everyday vocabulary because of what we're finding out with the new vaccines. So, Dr. Moondust, all over the world, we've focused on the great hope, and now the vaccines are here and they're being deployed. Have you got any updates for us on vaccinations?
So in countries that have had really rigorous vaccine programs like Israel and the UK, there definitely seems to be evidence that the vaccines are helping decrease mortality rates. But as you know, rarely there have also been some side effects, like the extreme allergic reactions with the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines,
Right.
and the blood clots with the AstraZeneca, and even the Johnson & Johnson now.
Mm-hmm.
Then there is also the factor of the rapidly evolving mutated variants from the UK, South Africa, Brazil, and now there's even a double mutant in India, which I hear is quite bad. And some of these are more transmissible, and some seem to be able to evade the immunity provided by the vaccines. But at the end of the day, it's still better to have a little protection than none. And that's why we call it the artillery of anti-COVID-19 weapons, because you want to have a variety of different types of protection instead of just one.
Exactly. And there we have it. We are come full circle right back to what we introduced our first segment with, which is your chapter about the artillery available to us in the Some RNA Viruses book. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we're hoping to have you back for a last and third segment. This time around, we're going to look at the question that everybody always has, no matter how in-depth their scientific knowledge is, how up-to-date they are on the latest on vaccinations, which is, what can we do to help protect ourselves? So we hope that you'll be back for our third segment, dear viewers, and we'll regroup and see what works in our lives and in our communities and what is in our hands to help protect ourselves. Thank you for joining us. See you back soon. Be safe and be well.